Hello, everyone. I'm Ray Silverman, and it's my honor and privilege to introduce our speaker this evening. The subject is nature as revelation. In the middle of the 18th century, Emanuel Swedenborg wrote, "Universal nature is a theater representative of the Lord's kingdom in heaven." This is from his book, Arcana Celestia, The Secrets of Heaven, number 3518. Universal nature is a theater representative of the Lord's kingdom in heaven. That'll be our subject tonight, how everything in this spiritual world has a corresponding effect in the natural world. Now about Steve. Steve is married to his wife, Judy. This summer, get your hands ready. They will be celebrating their 47th year of marriage. Let's hear it. 27 happy ones. I was going to say that was a tribute to Judy. Steve and Judy also have 2 children, Matt and Katie, and 5 grandchildren. They've all been notified about this presentation tonight, so they may be live streaming with many, many people who are also out there live streaming tonight. So if you're out there, Matt and Katie and Judy, Steve, you want to say hello? Hello, okay. Steve graduated from Syracuse University and the State University of New York, then worked in industry for 12 years. He worked for an organization that had 1.7 million acres of forest land, which they used to turn into paper, particle board, lumber, and so on. Now, if you're thinking, ouch, they are hurting the trees, they also practice healthy forest management practices to replenish and repurpose the forest lands that they used. 12 years later, Steve went back to college to pick up his PhD in environmental science and forestry from the State University of New York. Then on to teaching at Penn State. Any Penn State folks out there? Well, let's hear it. We are Penn State, that's right. He taught and he was administrative there. Then on to, get this, Auburn University. War Eagles, that's right. And if you're not up with March Madness, Auburn is just winning left and right, and they're now in the Final Four. So congratulations, Auburn. At Auburn, he was the head of state cooperative extension. Then on to many other positions, but he became the president of the University of Alaska, then the president of Urbana University in Ohio, our sister Swedenborgian College. And that's where I met Steve, and we'll hear more about that the meeting later. Then on to Antioch University, New England, and then on to his 4th college presidency at Fairmont State University. And if that's not enough, listen to this one. He was chairman of the governor's board of the University of the Arctic. That included Alaska, Canada, Denmark, where is Arne Bo Madsen? There's Arne back there. Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Russia, and Finland. This was a consortium of over 800,000 students. Is that right, 800,000 students? And so he's had a lot of experience in higher education, but beyond it all, his great love continued to be nature and the intimations of the divine in nature. So today, Steve serves as the founder of the Great Blue Heron LLC, an organization through which Steve does speaking, writing, and nature-based consulting. As an example, he is currently consulting with the Episcopalian Church. He is helping them understand how the environment and ecology of their 115-acre camp and conference has changed over time, and how they can envision its use for nature-based education, including the spiritual dimension. So I just want to conclude with a quote from George Santayana: "The earth has its music for those who will listen." And Steve Jones has his message of nature as revelation for those who will listen. Please put up your hands and welcome Steve Jones.
Episcopalian church camp that Ray talked about is actually 1,100 acres. It's down near Tuscaloosa, the other university in Alabama. And I don't hear any roll tides out there, Dan. Yeah, what a pleasure to be here. I was here with Dan about 3.5 years ago for a few days. And I felt like I was almost on another planet, not because I was with Dan, but because that cathedral. I've been on Duke's campus several times, and I felt like I was down in Durham looking at the wonderful Duke Cathedral. And you've got something here that is deeply rewarding and inspiring. And that includes your philosophy, the faith, the Swedenborgian way, and your physical plant here. The words physical plant don't do it justice. It's just an incredibly inspiring piece of the world. I'm a lifelong nature enthusiast, and appropriately enough, did that do it? Probably. What do I need to do? I thought I had this figured out. Cody to the rescue.
Say, by the way, while this is happening...
It's too late. It's too late. Go ahead.
Before I was really interrupted, while this is happening, people can text me at any point, both online, in the live streaming world, and here if you have a question that you'd like to ask. So we don't have to wait for the question and answer period. We like this to be interactive for the whole hour. So, and I'm assuming that my text is available to folks. Are they seeing that somewhere? Oh, the online folks. Okay, well, I'll get the one out for the folks here. Okay,
yeah,
Steve,
the appropriate punchline is, pardon me for talking while you're interrupting. Yeah, I'm a lifelong nature enthusiast, have been since when I was 6 years old in this photograph in 1957, sitting between my dad and my mom. And it's interesting that now I wake up every morning and shave my father's face. I mean, he's been deceased for 23 years, but it's he who looks back at me in the mirror. And I'm a natural resources practitioner, as a forester first, and then with a doctoral degree in education. I'm a lifelong environmental educator, I tell people. And I now have begun talking about my work as a spiritual ecologist. It's a term that's coming into vogue. And from the ultimate source, Wikipedia, spiritual ecology is an emerging field in religion, conservation, and academia, recognizing that there is a spiritual facet to all issues related to conservation, environmentalism, and earth stewardship. That my mentor, the Reverend Dr. Ray Silverman, tells me, backing it up with his discipline, that there is spiritual cause behind every natural effect. I didn't know that until Ray helped open my eyes that it's more than just an understanding that I've developed internally over the years. And it's such a great feeling of support and comfort to know that what I've come to believe has basis in Ray's academic and scholarly discipline. 25 years ago, and I mean this sincerely, I stumbled into higher education administration. There was no intent, it just happened. And the entire time I've been at senior levels within universities, I was still a forester at heart. I was still this little guy sitting between his parents, rooted to my youth and to my entire career as a practicing forester and scientist. I semi-retired in January of 2018, and I tell people what that means is I stay incredibly busy and no longer get a paycheck for it. But it still feels good. I'm now back to my roots. I was able to keep my toes in the water as a higher education administrator, but now everything that I do in my speaking, in my volunteering, in my writing, is rooted in my mission, which is to champion Earth stewardship. For the first time in my life, I don't know about any of you, but I now have a written Steve Jones mission statement. I've always helped develop missions for other organizations and entities. Now I have my own mission, my own written vision, and my own motto or tagline. The current mission is simple: to employ writing and speaking, to educate, inspire, and enable readers and listeners to understand, appreciate, and enjoy nature, and accept and practice Earth stewardship. My vision is two-part: that people of all ages will pay greater attention to and engage more regularly with nature, and will accept and practice informed and responsible Earth stewardship. And the second part of the vision is they will see their relationship to our natural world with new eyes, a new sense of clarity and understanding, and will more clearly resonate with this, their Earth home. And my tagline or motto is, Steve encourages and seeks a better tomorrow through nature-inspired living. I've published a couple books in the last 3 years. One is Nature-Based Leadership, the other Nature-Inspired Learning and Leading. And I will say to you shamelessly that I have copies back there. If you want to leave with one or both, we can arrange that. My journey, we're going to talk a little bit about my journey together. My journey because that's the only one I've taken. And I am bound and determined to reach a destination where I better understand and appreciate the wonders of nature and the lessons we can derive from nature through correspondence. I used to think that correspondence was letters you exchanged. Ray has opened my eyes that correspondence is something that I practiced without realizing it for most of my career. I want to hold up another book. This is my secular Bible. Any of you know of Aldo Leopold? Yeah, certainly. Grant knows. I was shocked and surprised and amazed that when I showed last evening Grant and Sarah photographs I had taken that morning of early spring wildflowers, they answered. I didn't even have to find a southeastern Pennsylvania reference book. They know their flowers. And I learned a new word. How many of you are familiar with the word spinny? It's smaller than a copse of trees and much, much smaller than the woods. A spinney is a small patch of trees and shrubs. It comes from my native language, only across the ocean. Fascinating. But a Sand County Almanac, Aldo Leopold is one of the patriarchs of conservation in North America. He wrote this book in 1948, published posthumously a year later. So 70 years ago, his wisdom is written throughout the book, and some of his quotes that I think, like our own Bible, are relevant today and timeless. One of his quotes, there are some who can live without wild things and some who cannot. These essays, he says, are the delights and dilemmas of one who cannot. He also said, and as an educator, I resonate with this one. He says, is education, this is 70 years ago, is education possibly a process of trading awareness for things of lesser worth? I'm afraid it is in many places, not here. Education, I fear, he also said, is learning to see one thing by going blind to another. The biggest cause of blindness in our modern society is this thing right here. And I don't mean blindness of the eye, but blindness of the heart, the spirit, the soul, and of humanity. And if I could dare get rid of it, I would throw it over in that corner. But people are blind to the world around them. I refer to it as the tyranny of the urgent. For some reason or other, we no longer pay attention to what's important. We instead focus on what's urgent. I want to begin to segue into the real purpose of our conversation this evening, and that is the wonders of nature and her lessons and correspondence. John Muir wrote 80 years, 60 years before Aldo Leopold, 130 years ago, when we contemplate the whole globe as one great dewdrop, striped and dotted with continents and islands, flying through space with other stars, all singing and shining together as one, the whole universe appears as an infinite storm of beauty. I love that phrase, an infinite storm of beauty. He also said, in every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks through exposure to that infinite storm of beauty. And Ray, we're going to pass it to you to speak to Wordsworth and youthful innocence.
This is from the manuscript that Steve and I were working on together called Nature as Revelation. And it begins with these words. In 1804, the British poet William Wordsworth wrote what many consider to be his most famous poem, Ode, Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. The whole poem is an expression of mixed grief and joy. The grief is about the passing of those early states of childhood when we had an intuitive and immediate grasp of nature's wonders. As Wordsworth puts it, heaven lies about us in our infancy. All too soon, however, we begin to lose that innate sense of connection to the wonders that nature simultaneously conceals and reveals. As we leave childhood behind, along with its innocent sense of wonder, quote, shades of the prison house begin to close, end quote, around us. Subtle suggestions of something greater which seem to be both beyond and within nature become fainter. These intimations of immortality, as Wordsworth calls them in his poem, no longer touch us. They no longer spark thoughts in our mind. Wordsworth puts it like this: not in entire forgetfulness and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy. Then he continues, remembering the blessings of childhood and that immediate sense of wonder in nature. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth, and every common sight to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. And then he mourns the passing of this time. O evil day, if I were sullen, while earth herself is adorning this sweet May morning, and the children are culling on every side, 1,000 valleys far and wide, fresh flowers, while the sun shines warm, and the babe leaps up on his mother's arm. I hear, with joy I hear. The pansy at my feet doth the same tale repeat. Whither is fled the visionary gleam? Where is it now, the glory and the dream? The youth who daily farther from the east must travel still is nature's priest, and by the vision splendid is on his way attended. And then he concludes with this epigraph, which is the epigraph for our entire report on nature as revelation. To me, the meanest flower that blows can give thoughts that do often lie too deep for tears. Steve?
Yeah, even Leopold echoed that sentiment when he said, "When I call to mind my earliest impressions, I wonder whether the process ordinarily referred to as growing up is not actually a process of growing down." One of the things that I've been blessed with is that when people ask me related to where I grew up, my answer is I started growing up right there through high school, and I've continued to grow up every year since then. I'm still growing up. That child within me remains within that image. When I'm wearing my full academic regalia, I still feel like a child of innocence inside, and I've never lost that appreciation for the beauty, the magic, the wonder, the awe that lies hidden within. Again, a naturalist who stumbled into higher education administration. And Ray mentioned that I call my little semi-retirement firm Great Blue Heron, LLC. Back when I was growing up, we went fishing, hiking, camping, picnicking regularly, and Dad and Mom too instilled in me that deep appreciation for nature. Dad passed away 23 years ago, and at the time I considered myself a distance runner, and if you've watched me go up and down the stairs, you might guess that I don't run anymore. But on the morning of his memorial service in western Maryland, over in the central Appalachians, the temperature was in the mid single digits. Very, very beautiful, crisp, clear weather. And I went out that morning, leaving the house before dawn completely broke, and was running a 10-mile loop. And about halfway out, I'd gone south and had turned back north. And about halfway out, I was running on a road above Evetts Creek, heading upstream, and I noticed ahead of me in some rapids, most of the creek had frozen over, and in the rapids, a great blue heron stood there. Dad loved great blue herons because of their majesty, their size, their ferocity as a predator, and everything about them. And as I ran closer, the bird was watching me as I was looking at it. We locked eyes. I stopped, and it must have been at least 30 seconds, the bird and I were gazing, I felt, deeply into each other's eyes, and the sun had just broken above the ridge to the east, and the bird raised its wings, and instead of flying downstream or upstream, and I don't know if it was a he, but I think of it as a he because of its symbology of my dad, it spiraled up and past the orb of the sun, and I didn't see it after that. The bird, in effect, from my vision, disappeared. And to this day, I associate my dad's memory, his spirit, his soul, and his blood that courses through my veins with the great blue heron. And every time I see a great blue heron now, I think of Dad with great fondness and tremendous admiration and gratitude. And the heron is a symbol. I know Dad didn't return as a heron, but his memory returns very vividly every time I see one. So that's me with an image of a great blue heron at Wheeler National Wildlife Refuge down along the Tennessee River in Alabama. And here I am standing with my banner, my Great Blue Heron LLC banner. He remains a part of me. I carry 50% of his chromosomes, and it's just a big part of who I am. That's, if you picture that little boy sitting between his parents, there he is again. And nature instills in me a grand sense of appreciation, a feeling of great humility, because sitting against that 120-foot tall yellow poplar, I am nothing. But at the same time, that yellow poplar provides a lift of inspiration that, for me, is just palatable. And I'm going to go quickly through some of these photographs. This is a tree of another color. This is along the Chena River in Fairbanks, Alaska, where we lived for 4 years. And that is deep, deep, deep winter as we begin to move closer to the vernal equinox when there's plenty of daylight. And again, inspiration and humility. And Ray and I talked about what do we do with some of these photos. I'll tell you, this is a photo of a prairie crabapple that I snapped February before last out in the Tallgrass Prairie National Monument in Kansas. And Ray, why don't you see if you can generate a few comments about what do you see in that photograph besides the old guy?
Well, thanks, Steve. Yeah, we thought we wanted this to be interactive and fun and learning as well. And we thought we'd show these photographs and not tell you what they mean to us, but ask you what they mean to you. And you can, talk to a neighbor, or if you're streaming us, talk to whoever's in the room with you. Look at the photograph, and we'll just ask for people to either email me or text me, or raise your hands if you're in the room. And what might this mean? And it could mean anything, but we're talking about correspondences. Jane. Oh, by the way, we do have a mic so people could hear you. Cody's coming around.
And for my sake, will you tell us who you are?
Blair, alumna of here. The first thought was, is the tree splitting through the rock?
It's a limestone limestone ledge, and you see it as a tree splitting the rock. Okay. And I hope you're feeling better, by the way.
And so if the tree's splitting the rock, what would that correspond to in your life? You don't have to answer the question, but I'd like you to if you have a thought, or anyone else. Jane, we'll get you next, Helen.
Well, take this heart of stone and put a heart of flesh in it.
Well, how about that? Let's hear for Jane. Come on. Yeah. This is Helen Kennedy. Helen is coming with the mic. I'm checking my phone to see if anybody has texted me also.
Going along with what Jane said, I see a tree as perception, and I would say it was perception or higher things coming down into the natural or the literal world.
Mm-hmm. Let's hear it for Helen. Okay. Anybody else? We do have something from one of our online folks here. Let's bring this up. This is exciting. This is from Michelle Rose. This is Angela's sister, actually. That is a beautiful story about the great blue heron. Here in Bernathen, people have had experiences with the great blue heron connected to the death of a loved one. Michelle, we're shouting out for you. Let's thank Michelle, everybody. Okay. In fact, we were told a very moving story about a great blue heron experience.
Yeah, Ray and I, we had one full tear experience this morning.
Yeah.
With that,
yeah.
And a near tear experience later. The whole philosophy, as I've come to understand it, is deeply emotional, even as it's spiritual.
Right. Deeply emotional, even as it's spiritual. And that's, when the natural and the spiritual come together, there is a power like nothing else. We talk about it as the letter of the word in the spiritual sense coming together as one, but it's also nature and spirit coming together, and it moves us to tears. When he said one tier experience and two tier experience, he didn't mean levels, he meant tears, right?
Yeah,
Right,
T-E-A-R-S.
yeah. Okay, do you want to go on with more?
Yeah, and as a natural resources scientist, what I puzzled, Judy and I both, as we hiked on the prairie, puzzled over this tree growing on that raw limestone ledge. And finally it struck me that the tree seed happened to fall there. It didn't split the stone, but instead exploited the soil that had accumulated in the fissure. And amazingly enough, that was one of the more protected spots on the prairie, because grazers, whether it's deer or buffalo, could not reach it and chew on it and consume it. So it was protected. It was also elevated above the competing grass below it. So even from my scientist viewpoint, I see reasons that are both science-based, and then the spiritual struck me as well, as this tree stood alone, presiding over the prairie that went on to every horizon. And I have to caution myself as a scientist, as a biologist, not to be blinded by the facts and not to look at it only through the lens of a scientist, but to engage all five portals: mind, body, heart, soul, and spirit. Because it means so much more when we're not blinded by the cold, hard facts and science.
Steve, I just wanted to say too, as I'm looking at it now, I'm thinking about what you said, the rocks actually protecting that tree and keeping the predators away from it. And so, the rock of truth and the truth that we have from the Lord, protecting us, it's such a beautiful thing. I took a walk with Steve on the Pennypack today. I love walking with Steve because he points out so many things to me, and I saw all these trees that they were clinging to the rock desperately. And I'm thinking about how sometimes we have to cling to the Lord's word desperately in precarious situations. And the Pennypack walk took on a whole new level of meaning for me, just seeing it through Steve's biologist eyes and just ecologist eyes. Steve.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
I apologize for putting myself in so many pictures, but it helps to have a frame of reference, a scale. Anybody recognize what that little ecotype is? You're close. It's a water tupelo swamp. Though it's much the same condition, and the tupelo are deciduous hardwood, and the cypress is a deciduous conifer. But Ray had pointed me toward a quote, and it is, "And he shall, as a tree planted by the waters, and by the river he shall send forth his roots." We went back out to the Tupelo swamp, a few weeks ago, and there were mats of tupelo seed floating there, waiting to be carried to a place to anchor roots and start a new tupelo seedling. And you had a follow-up quotation as well.
We sang that in church on Saturday for memorial service and on Sunday in the regular service, and I thought, this is too providential. And the words are so beautiful. Blessed the man who confideth in the Lord, and the Lord is his trust. And he shall be as a tree planted by the waters, and by the river he shall send forth his roots, and he shall not see when heat cometh, and his leaf shall be green, and in the year of drought he shall not be anxious, and he shall not cease from bearing fruit. And the power of thinking that nothing can stop you, when you are planted by the river of the Lord's truth, and you're not going to be anxious, and you're not going to dry out, and you're going to bear fruit no matter what's happening. This is so powerful.
So is this correspondence?
It's called a correspondence, that's right.
And now we move to the cypress swamp, a very similar kind of habitat. And as you can see, if you ignore the boardwalk, the stems are densely packed, many, many stems per acre. And there's a concept in forestry called crown shyness. The crowns are the canopy. So I positioned myself flat on my back and took a photograph up into the crown. And the term crown shyness, most people envision the forest with interlaced branches and all interconnected, but you see a faint outline of buffer between each tree. They are expressing a densely packed forest condition and yet distance between each tree. And it reminded me of something that we saw as we walked around campus today. We'll call it people shyness. Densely packed, yet not touching, not seeing, not communicating. They're densely packed and isolated by this device that precipitates blindness.
However, there is hope. There's one person reading a book in this picture if you look closely. Do you see that person right by the Jefferson Station sign with his back to us? That person's reading a book.
And Ray and I did not see it. Sean, who's back in the control booth,
That's
pointed
right.
out the gentleman reading.
Let's hear it for Sean. Come on.
And what do you see that the guy reading the book has that nobody else has? Gray hair. It's a generational division, we assume. So one thing I've learned over my life is that no matter how original I think my thought is, somebody beat me to the punch, often by a century or more. And I'll give a few more quotations from John Muir. The clearest way into the universe is through a forest wilderness. I thought maybe that was my conclusion, and I was the first one to reach it. That was 130 years ago. Muir says, keep close to nature's heart and break clear away once in a while and climb a mountain or spend a week in the woods. Wash your spirit clean. And another one, I love this one too. Everyone needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and places to pray in, where nature may heal and give strength to the body and soul. He also said, and he uses prose in a way that is so poetic, so prophetic, and so profound. He says, between every two pines is a doorway to a new world. These two pines happen to be slash pine, about a mile from the Gulf of Mexico in southern Alabama on the coastal plain. But I haven't used those exact words before, but I've imagined from the time, maybe a little after I sat on the couch with Mom and Dad, that there are doorways through every forest and between every two pine trees. And Ray, I don't know if you want to follow that with something germane or not.
I'm just, well, you know, John Muir was one of our more famous Swedenborgians too, and Steve just gravitated to John Muir, not because of any Swedenborgian background, because of the truth in what he said. He spoke about sermons in stone and learning so much from watching nature and taking nature in and letting nature somehow speak to us about the divine.
And two more quotes and then into another personal experience and story. The mountains are calling and I must go. Again, John Muir. And climb the mountains and get their good tidings. When we were at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, we went forward rather than backward. And we lived in Fairbanks on a bluff overlooking the Tanana River. We look due south, you can see the central Alaska range with peaks 12 to 14,000 feet tall, about 70 miles due south. And we were told when we moved there at the end of June that if you were to swing your gaze to the southwest and then west-southwest, on the very clearest day, you could see Denali, the highest peak in North America at 20,317 feet. We had been there through August and still hadn't seen the mountain from campus. We had friends coming up from the lower 48. We drove down to the entrance of Denali National Park, hopped in a Cessna we had arranged to meet us at the gravel airstrip just off the park, climbed in, flew back to Kantishna, which is a lodge and little gravel airstrip about 20 miles directly to the north of the base of the mountain. We saw maybe the lower 7,000 feet of Denali as we flew back. Even that's an incredible sight with snowfields and rock faces and Exing glaciers, but we couldn't see the upper two-thirds. We landed at the gravel airstrip, made our way into the lodge, and even if the mountain had been clear, we wouldn't have seen it because Mount Quigley, which is eluding my pointer. So as you're looking up that valley, in the very lowest part of the valley, this photograph was taken in the early 1900s during the placer mining gold rush days. Quigley is up to the right. Quigley at about 3,500 feet would have blocked our view of Denali from the airstrip. So the next morning, I awoke early. The sky was clear above us, but that didn't mean that Denali would be clear because it makes its own weather. I worked my way up that valley just above the stream to the right, and eventually would look back and see the Denali, not the Denali, but the Kantishna airstrip shrinking and shrinking. I could look off to the north, to the horizon, toward infinity. And I was so smug. Here I was climbing a mountain in Alaska. And I say climbing. In retrospect, I was hiking up what had been an old access trail to one of the gold camps. As I neared the top, feeling as though I had just conquered the wild and savage beast, I stopped because I felt as though somebody was watching me. And I stopped, and my gaze went to the south. And at first, my gaze was horizontal. And then I looked up and up and up. And there, can you see that? The most magnificent sight of my life. And in that one instant, I felt total humility. Climbing Quigley was nothing. In fact, my entire life was nothing compared to this magnificent image. In that same instant, I felt overwhelming inspiration. And my lesson from that is, in view of this magnificent symbol of God's power and beauty and magic and wonder and awe, I was struck that that lesson has application for everything I was doing. If I were to lead, as I was, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, I have to have both humility and inspiration. Because here I am charged to lead this institution we knew as America's Arctic University, touching the lives of thousands and thousands of people every day. I had to have a sense of humility for having the blessing of being placed there to lead the institution. But also in every day I awoke and every night when I turned off the light, feeling a sense of inspiration for this magnificent university and our charge to change the world for the lives we touched. So inspiration and humility.
We spoke about this, and it was so beautiful to share Steve's story and feel the power of two things which sometimes seem like opposites, humility and the the uplift of inspiration. And it came to me, the scripture, every valley shall be exalted. You might feel a lot of humility and humble and small about your place in the world. And that's good because the Lord exalts that. And every mountain shall be brought low. Every sense of arrogance and I'm better than and I can conquer the world, that'll be brought down. That's exactly what happened to Steve. He was full of himself when he conquered little Quigley and then looked up and saw Denali and was, whoa. And so he got a double blessing of humility and inspiration at the same moment. Every mountain shall be brought low and every valley shall be exalted. It was just beautiful. Now, Steve just had that without the scripture. And so together, we had this experience that, yeah, this is it. This is what it's all about.
And Ray let you and I make an executive decision.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking about that.
It's 8:16. Do we go into Urbana University?
Oh, boy.
Or do you want to go on?
I don't know. So that only gives us 14 minutes left for questions and answers.
So why don't we leap forward? I'll simply say that I served as president at Urbana University for 5 years. That was my first ever exposure to Swedenborg. It was incredible that there I was at a university that Johnny Appleseed, that this Forrester had a chance to serve that institution. There were many elements that served as divine providence. Is that the right word?
Yes. Yeah.
And also while we were there, and here I am, I'm going to stop because my temptation is to continue and talk more about Urbana. We can talk about Urbana, a sister Swedenborgian institution,
but
later if you like.
I want to tell my Urbana story because it's so funny. This is great. So I've been to Urbana twice as the Swedenborgian scholar in residence, and my last time I was out there, I noticed and I was touched by their library has this huge nunc licet intellectualiter. Now it is permitted to enter into the mysteries of faith in Latin. So I was speaking to a class at Urbana. I was a guest lecturer, and I went to different classes, and I said, do any of you know what that Latin nunc licet means over the library? And it's big. It's over the whole entrance to the library. And one student raised his hand. I was so excited. He says, yes, it means be quiet in the library. Anyway, that's my Urbana story. But they were very sweet to me out there. It was great.
That was a good story. So let's go back to some more photographs that speak to nature's infinite storm of beauty and how it relates to why we're up here this evening. I think part of what that youthful innocence in my mind has done for me, it enables me to see things combined with my education and background in forestry and applied ecology and spiritual ecology. It allows me to see things that are hidden to so many people, and they leap out at me. And I don't have a fancy camera, and yet I include many, 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 I think, wonderful photographs in my weekly blog posts on nature-inspired life and living. What a gift this thing is for that purpose, not the purpose that blinds us. And somehow I am able to take photographs that reveal what is hidden to many people. And I don't limit my photography to things on a grand scale like the Grand Canyon or Denali, but instead I see beauty, magic, wonder, and awe in the smallest of things, and not just in terra firma, but also in the glory of the heavens above us. From my angle, the photograph is a bit blurry. I hope it's clear to you. This is last summer when a derecho, have you ever heard of that? It's an intense summer system that can go across nearly the entire country. And this was an amazing sky that I photographed. You can see by the tree in the foreground right that already it's leaning. The wind is beginning to howl. That is an angry sky. That sky says there is a lot of turbulence and wind up at about 4,000 feet. And within minutes, we were in the midst of the squall and the fury. But there are signals and symbols also, instead of just the raw warning that the storms are coming. And do you have any thoughts on that, Ray?
Oh, just keep going.
Okay. And that to me looks like a jellyfish. It also looks like a cirrus fountain. It's amazing that I took this photograph at near the Gulf of Mexico with the temperature on the ground probably 70. It's a beautiful, clear blue sky. It's kind of Penn State blue, don't you think? And the clouds are at about 30,000 feet, and the temperature in the clouds is 60 degrees below zero. All of that within a 6-mile stretch vertically. And just the beauty, the magic, the wonder, the awe. And I'm not sure you could appreciate it if you didn't know those things. Sure, it's a pretty picture of a nice cirrus cloud. But to me, understanding more about the facts and the science helped me appreciate it. And this is a slash pine, again, down near the Gulf of Mexico. And to me, it's backdropped by a halo of cirrus puffs. I can look at that and the spirituality screams at me, not in an unpleasant way, but in a loud voice that says, pay attention. There's magic in the world around you. This is in honor of Mrs. Silverman. Those are stars. And I put this one in the series at Ray's request. I was going to walk over there, but somebody will throw something at me because it'll squeal. Anybody know what constellation that is? Who said something? Oh,
That was Eugene.
Eugene gets it. Gets the smiley face. It's the Southern Cross. It's visible only in the Southern Hemisphere. And are you going to play your music?
Oh, do you want me to bring it up?
Well,
It'll take me a minute. I'll find it while you're talking.
Okay. But Ray thought when I told him I was going to show an image of the Southern Cross, he thought I was going to show this image. But the image I actually captured with my camera was taken from my back patio. And because I live in the South, I called this the Southern Cross. Can you hear that? Anybody know who that is singing? Yes. Crosby, Stills, Nash, without Young.
Did they hear that?
Yeah, it's a song about the Southern Cross, inspired by...
Here it comes. Just a minute. Just a minute. That's it. Let's hear it for Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
So, again, there's magic, and this is simply two contrails crossing, and the alignment was perfect from my patio, and that some people might take it as a sign or a symbol. I thought it was worthy of sharing and appreciating. I told Ray I had a photograph of the sky on fire. That sunset, again, from our home in northern Alabama. Anybody know what that is? Jane? They're actually, and I'll tell you more, this is looking due west at sunrise. If you were looking due east, they would be crepuscular rays. As it is, because you're looking at the anti-solar point, they're anti-crepuscular rays. The sun's rays have risen from the east, passed overhead, and are converging to the west at dawn. And again, if you didn't, my contention is, if you didn't know the science behind it, you probably might take it as less than the magnificent sight that it is. So I combine the spirituality with the science and find an order of magnitude higher beauty, magic, wonder, and awe. I'm doing a project over in East Central Ohio, staying at a small cabin on a little lake, and so many people I talk to, and I won't mention Ray by name, seldom see the sun rising, and I wouldn't miss it.
But I always have the stars in my eyes.
That's good. And again, the beauty, the magic, the wonder, the awe, the lessons, the symbolism, the spirituality is not limited to the grand scale. This is a rock, a piece of limestone at Chehaw State Park in Alabama, our highest point in the state. And look at that combination of moss and lichen. So many people would not see it, would not appreciate it, and I find it magical. And Ray, ask them what they see.
What do you see? Everyone who sees a rabbit, raise your hand. Everyone sees a fish, raise your hand. Yeah, all right.
Yes. Yeah, I saw this, the dense moss on that exposed rock caught my eye. It was only after I had the image back home, was editing a bit, and flipped it on its 180 degrees, then I saw the fish. So is that a symbol of anything? I don't know. I think it's magical. And if you walked through the woods and didn't see it, woe to you. Ray, I have 827.
Yeah, well, do you want to get to the blue orb, and then we can conclude that and maybe ask some questions?
Okay, so we'll just run through some of these. Another, I called it a lichen mosaic on a rock. I took a walk yesterday morning. I was careful to close the door quietly so I didn't awaken my host, and found along Washington Road,
Washington Lane, yeah.
Washington Lane, bloodroot in flower. Bloodroot's an amazing plant. If you were to dig up the rhizome and cut it, it bleeds. That is, its sap is blood red. And this one, thanks to my friends in the back row, is lesser celandine. It's a weed, an invasive, and yet we talked with Vera a little bit ago about a weed is simply a plant growing where you don't want it, and you can actually find the beauty and the magic in a weed, and yeah, they're everywhere right now. And if you look at the time out. Did I turn it on? Yeah. It's such a beautiful color of yellow, and it shines much like a buttercup. I decided that this is my first exposure to it, and I think I'm happy that it's not a weed. I don't accept that it's a weed.
Well, it's a weed in my yard, Steve.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed for the number of weeds I saw in Ray's lawn. These are snowdrops, again in flower. That's periwinkle or myrtle, which is another escaped ornamental, but lovely just the same. And that is Siberian Scilla. Say what? Scilla. Yeah. And Ernie, you see those over, Eugene, you see those over in Siberia? You're too busy looking at the birds. And there is a story in every facet of nature. This is an old walnut tree that could tell probably 120 years worth of stories. Just a magnificent specimen that has character and spirit written all through it. Lichen on a fence rail I saw yesterday morning. And this worries me because no matter where I've lived, I've found evidence that maybe we don't care enough about this one home that we have, this pale blue orb, this mote of dust in the vast darkness of space. And it wasn't just an isolated spot, it was the entire shoulder as you head on down toward what's the name of that?
Turwood.
Yeah, what he said. And this is the only home we have. It's likely the only home we'll ever have. And I think one of the things that Swedenborg said to us, maybe not directly, but implied that we have an obligation, both spiritually and objectively, and both implied and demanded that we care for this common home that we all share. And part of my mission is to inspire people to take responsibility and to do all we can to steward this earth. Ray?
Yeah, well, I just want to thank you, Steve, for a very inspiring presentation. Please join me in thanking Steve.
And I want to say one more thing. I publish these weekly blog posts. They're absolutely free, and all you have to do is hit a button to unsubscribe. But we have a couple lists out there. If you'll put your name and email address on it, I will add you to my list that notifies you when I issue a new post. And the posts are all about nature-inspired life and living, with photographs and text.
Steve, on behalf of Bernathen College, we'd like to give you a little gift, and thank you so much for coming to us and blessing us with your words tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Please, once again, let's thank Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we ran out of time for questions and answers, but we hope that you, if you'd like to, you can stay, and we'll be here to discuss further. Anyway, thank you all tonight for coming, and God bless.